In any life, we have highs and lows, light and dark, wins and losses. What happens when we encounter that moment in time when what happens next could change everything? Join us as we step into another person's inspirational moment and see how we can connect their experience to ours. This is Greg Stevens, and you're listening to A Shot of Inspiration. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Stevens. I'm your host for another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. Today, we have two people that are in business together. The business is called Symmetry Live. And if you want to get to their website, it's symmetry.live. And we have Taylor Somerville and Lauren Vestal. And I met Taylor and Lauren through Chris Williams, a friend of ours. You might have heard me talk about him before, but he connected us. And I love the work that they're doing. They're actually working with people to lower stress, improve their mental health, and their focus is all around breathing and helping people get their system, I guess, in essence, the engine that runs everything, the breath, get it in line to lower the stress. Taylor, Lauren, thank you for being on the show. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Greg.
Thanks. Taylor, let's start out with you. You didn't just ever really think about starting a company that worked on mental health and breathing and lowering stress. What did you do before, and how did you get into the breathing techniques and the focus of your organization?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I never thought about that. I spent 15 years in the investment business, starting it from right after college in my mid 30s, going from registered investment advisors, accounting firms. Spent the last 10 years on a trading floor doing macroeconomics. And as I was in that environment, very stressful, a lot of personal stress. I was going through, when I really found these techniques, I was going through a divorce. So I had the personal stress and anxiety of that, along with just crazy markets, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out what is going on in the world. This time is after the big financial crisis of 2007, 8 is when my anxiety and stress and levels really picked up, just really trying to figure out what in the hell is going on. And I was under intense pressure, very short tempered, very reactionary, had trouble sleeping, just really had troubles going through the waves of life. And then that kind of combined with that divorce going through, understanding that, oh man, life changes pretty rapidly. You can have an entire plan and then it all comes crashing down pretty quickly. And I got into mindfulness meditation at that point, just going to see therapists. And that led me on the path to finding quite a few different breathing techniques and really dove into those and noticed just a pretty quick shift in how I was able to handle stress. There were things that used to set me off, trigger me, whether it was that kind of deep feeling of overwhelm and you can't control what's going on in the world, to just flying off the handle because something bad happened. I was able to let that slide a little bit. And through that process, just kept diving deeper in the other modalities we use. We do things like ice baths and saunas at Symmetry as
Ooh,
well. And understand that the breath was super powerful. These were techniques that had been around for basically ever, for human
right.
existence. You can look at every religion talks about the breath, every ancient culture talks about the breath. So it's none of this stuff is new, but it's now come back into vogue. People are using it, finding the powers of it. Every research institution is looking at it. And basically, as I was going through all that, I decided I didn't really want to be sitting at a desk anymore. I looked around. I was like, I don't leave my current job. I'll be here when I'm 65, just doing the same thing. And I didn't want to do that. I knew that was not going to be good for my mental health, my physical health. I knew I would end up with high blood pressure, along with basically every other chronic illness that you could probably imagine, and made a change and quit my job in 2017 and started Symmetry in 2018. And we've been growing since then. Brought Lauren on, God, what is that? Probably over 2 years, about 2 years ago now,
That's awesome.
that we've been working together.
And you have a very different background than Lauren. Lauren, you were in the fashion industry, isn't that right? In New York
Yes.
City.
Yes. So very different, also high paced, very intense, but very different type of industry. I played soccer all through college. So I had started dabbling in a yoga practice then, which started piquing my interest in the breath. But I didn't really get into it until I moved to Memphis from Manhattan. So when I lived in New York, I was in fashion, like you mentioned, and the wholesale side. So I was selling to stores, places also like Anthropologie, Saks, Bloomingdale's, kind of bigger stores, but also really small, privately owned, what we call specialty stores. So everybody always needed something from you. And in sales, you're never off. And the expectation is that you are always on. And I set myself up not for success in that way, I guess you could say, because I really fully leaned into that, especially first starting out. I didn't really have any boundaries in terms of work, which created a lot of stress because then it was just this self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak, in that I would get so frustrated because people would email me or text me at all hours, but it was really because I had trained them that was acceptable. So really, even finding these practices, and I didn't really find the breath work that Taylor found until I was during my yoga practice. I found it, and I since became a registered yoga teacher also, which kind of piqued my interest even more because there's this breath body connection. But I really started getting interested in the science behind the breath because we hear a lot about the breath. Taylor mentioned it's like in vogue now, but what people don't always get is what's happening physiologically with the body. And we focus a lot on that as well. So, really, the science behind it. And I love this kind of combination of ancient techniques with the science mapped on top of it. So, I started learning more about that. And when I was pregnant, you can't do some of the breathing techniques. So I had to wait until after I was pregnant. So when I was postpartum, before I was cleared to work out again, I did a 30-day breath challenge that Taylor had put out, and it saved me. Like it was the 5 minutes a day that I really could focus on myself, have just a little bit of peace because I couldn't move my body really in the way that I wanted to at that point. And it really was a game changer. It was like, okay, your life has been thrown into a whole new realm with a new baby. Nothing is the same. And it was just this little snippet of calm that I could take for myself that kind of allowed me to reset the day and get literally my breath back under control so that I could be more present and try to be a good mom in the as I was figuring it out. So that's a quick little background of where I came from and how I got linked up with Taylor too.
Well, you piqued my interest. Why? What is it that you can't do this when you're pregnant? What is it? Because physically your body is someone else has inhabited you. So,
And you can do a lot of things, certainly,
right.
like the slower breathing patterns, but things like really long breath holds or some of the faster breathing patterns are contraindications for pregnancy. But obviously, if you are pregnant, you don't want to deprive your baby of oxygen either. So super long breath holds are one of the things that you can't do is, and we try and stay away from a lot of the faster kind of power breathing.
Yeah. That's something I just never would have thought of. So when you said that, it piqued my interest for sure. How did you run into Taylor for him to teach you some of that? How did you hear about Taylor first, Lauren?
I knew Taylor from teaching yoga. I
Okay.
think that's where we
Yeah.
first met at the studio, right? And so
Yep.
I
Took,
knew
took
about
her yoga
symmetry.
classes.
Yeah. And I think I just stopped you after class one day and I was like, "Hey, I like read a little bit about your background. I'm going to do the XPT training that you did, and I'm going to sign up for your breathing challenge after this baby gets here." And he was like, "Cool, that's great."
That's
So
great. Yeah.
And then
Now,
we started just started chatting more about it and going through everything, and knew she was very interested in learning more. And she mentioned the science. That's a big part of what we are. We focus on the principles, understanding the principles of physiology, what's going on in the body, because there's a lot of methods out there,
yeah.
and not every method is good for every person.
Yeah.
And so she was very interested in that, and we just kept chatting about it. And then she ended up doing some more one-on-one training with me, and brought her on to help coach in a much larger capacity. Now she's a vital part of the team.
That's great. Taylor, I'm going to pose the question to you then. Give me some of the science behind it that people would find like, wow, I never knew that. It interests me because, and it sounds like you really tailor it to the individual, what they're doing. So walk me through some of the things, our audience, some of the things they might not know about what breathing techniques will do for them and a little of the science behind it, where kind of the layperson can understand.
Yeah. We'll keep
Yeah.
it simple. The biggest thing that most people don't realize is that we're not breathing because we need oxygen. We're breathing because carbon dioxide levels rise in our system. Most of us were just taught that carbon dioxide is a waste gas and that we just expel carbon dioxide, breathe in oxygen, and expel carbon dioxide. But that CO2 is necessary. And that is what causes, it's based on what's called the Bohr effect, causes oxygen to leave your red blood cells. So the oxygen goes into your lungs as you breathe in, goes down into your alveoli, gets on your red blood cells, the hemoglobin goes to the heart, goes all over the body. From there, in order to use that oxygen, you got to have enough carbon dioxide to knock it off the red blood cells, off that hemoglobin, because it's a very tight bond. What happens most of the time, people are breathing in and out of their mouth all the day, so they're blowing off too much carbon dioxide. We have receptors in our brain, in our brainstem, and our arteries, these chemoreceptors that are constantly monitoring that level. So what will happen is if you're mouth breathing a lot, you'll lower that chemosensitivity. So you overbreathe, you breathe in too much. You're not really using the oxygen you're taking in. Basically, you're an inefficient user of oxygen. And what that causes a whole host of issues, from putting you into a larger stress response. And also the carbon dioxide is important because it opens up and dilates your airways and your blood vessels. So you can also get more blood into your brain. When you're breathing in and out of your mouth all day, you're also not filtering out any of the air. So your nose is really made for breathing. That's one of the first things we teach, which you hear a lot more about that now, is nasal breathing. But we look at breath as like basically 5 pillars. We have everyday breathing, how you're breathing all day long, which is vitally important. That's breathing in through your nose because you're going to filter clean out of the air. You have enough resistance, so you balance out carbon dioxide and oxygen properly. You also have nitric oxide in your nasal passages, which is antimicrobial and antibacterial, and also helps open up and dilate the airways and blood vessels. Then that also helps to activate your diaphragm, which is your main breathing muscle. It sits right under your ribs. It's really your center of gravity. When it's moving properly, it is pumping lymphatic fluid, helping detoxify your body naturally. Breathing is one of the best ways to naturally detoxify, massages all your internal organs. Got a ton of lymph nodes under there. And if we're breathing into our mouth, we breathe into that upper chest, and using the secondary neck and shoulders. People have a lot of neck and shoulder pain, most good chance of breathing in and out of their mouth, or low back pain. Both of those can correspond with how you're breathing. So we're looking at that diaphragmatic breathing, that lower breathing is what we call it. And then also breathing slower. So that's your everyday breathing. Then you have techniques to ground you, calm you down. Anything that's more exhale focused tends to be a little bit more calming. So we extend the exhale over the inhale. That's the easiest thing there. There are a bunch of different techniques we use on that front we can talk about. Then you have techniques that can activate you, really ramp your nervous system up, be more inhale focused, or some of the faster breathing patterns like Lauren mentioned will give you a boost of energy, because the breath can change your state. It's the only thing that's unconscious, but it's under control. And it's that tool we can use to change our mental and physical state. So you can breathe for the state that you want, whether to calm yourself down or to give yourself a little boost of energy. Then we look at techniques, more the breath holds, like Lauren talked about, that we call them like stress resilience breathing. So you're understanding your stress response. What happens when your body starts to really feel like, oh God, I got to breathe. I got to breathe. How can you let go into that? Be calm, be cool, and learn to deal with that. And your body can learn to deal with stress a little bit better. Techniques that like free divers use as well there. And then you have like transformational breathing, which is much longer, more intense, can release emotional responses, trauma. There's anything like holotropic breathing or conscious connected breath. There's a lot of stuff out there on that front. And that's a lot of what you see when people think about breath work, but it's just one of the areas. So those are the 5 areas that we're looking at when we're focused on breathing.
I had no idea there was that much. I
There's
really
a lot.
didn't.
It can get very
Yeah.
detailed. But we try to keep it very simple with our
Oh, yeah.
clients. And like really one of the main things is we focus on that everyday breathing at first. How are you breathing mechanically? The biochemistry of using the oxygen properly, that's going to make every system in your body work better. So your heart's not going to have to pump as hard. It's going to help lower your blood pressure. It's going to improve your digestion. If you're not breathing properly, you can also have things like acid reflux, going to help release tension in the body. So we focus on that everyday breathing is like the first thing we're doing, because it's like building the base. It's the foundation. When you can get that right and just change, we've had plenty of clients who are like, man, I just started breathing through my nose and I feel way calmer as I go through the day. And so just that one little shift, anybody takes anything from this, it's like focus on that, just how you're breathing every day as you start out. And then you can learn the other techniques.
Yeah, it's interesting, Taylor, because
there
as
as
you
well.
said that, I thought it for years. I was a snorer. I just thought I snored, and everyone told me, "No, you're stopping breathing." No, I'm not, because I sleep great. I did a sleep study, and I stopped breathing 47 times an hour. And then I got a CPAP machine, and it was difficult because I was a mouth breather. And I'd always been, because I had surgery and some stuff, but until recently, I wasn't even able to breathe out of my nose. Then I started breathing out of my nose with a CPAP machine, and I fought it. It took me about 3 to 4 months, but I knew I wanted to get better. It was hard to shift that. Now I even do all my workouts just breathing through my nose, and it's a huge difference. I can truly say that one thing, but I don't think I would have been able to make the adjustment had I not had to do it through a CPAP machine. What do you find difficult, either one of you, what do you find difficult to get people to change the patterns of how they breathe? What are some of the more difficult pieces? But I also want to talk on the back end of that. Once you get them to, what are the benefits some of those people have had? Lauren,
Lauren,
you
you
want
wanna
to
take
take
that?
this first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just like your struggle, a lot of our clients come to us not even knowing that nasal breathing is what they should be focusing on a daily basis. So, like Taylor mentioned, that's the first thing that we focus on. And it's hard because if you've been breathing a certain way your entire life or the majority of your adult life, switching gears like that for something that's mostly unconscious, making it conscious takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So, we focus on just as much as you can throughout the day, focus on nasal breathing. I had one client who sent me a screenshot of she wore an Aura Ring or a Fitbit, whatever tracker, kind of data tracker. And within a week, her resting heart rate had dropped 5 beats per minute just by focusing on breathing through her nose without changing anything else.
That just
So,
woke me up to, yeah, my resting heart rate is actually lower now. I was wondering, if it got lower
mhm.
over the last couple of years, and you just answered my question. I was like, it used to be higher.
Yeah. And then the other thing we really focus on, like Taylor mentioned, for everyday breathing, not only slowing it down, but breathing diaphragmatically. So breathing with the diaphragm, your main breathing muscle, but that also means letting the ribs expand laterally, letting the belly kind of expands as a byproduct of the diaphragm pulling down and the ribs expanding as well. Even from a young age, we go to the doctor's office, they put the stethoscope on your chest and say, take a deep breath in. Everybody starting out most of the time takes a big inhale, shoulders go up, chest expands. And now we have this paradoxical breathing pattern or a vertical breathing pattern where the shoulders are going up and there's really no action in the ribs. So that's one of the hardest things that I see people struggle with is getting the ribs to expand. And it's really just muscular training also, just teaching them how to breathe differently. We've got different techniques to help with that, like different exercises that can give them a little bit of physical feedback so they can really feel when the ribs are expanding or not. It's hard to retrain. So we preach a lot of patience and grace and just keep coming back to basics. And eventually that will become your new breathing pattern
That's
and
awesome.
it'll serve you well.
That's great. Taylor, tell us some of the successes you've had where people were, some of the, just like Lauren was talking about, the resting heart rate lowering. That's so good. But what are some of the other things you've seen, some of the people who come to you, or some of the results they've had?
Yeah, and that's one of the big ones people will see right out of the gate is a low resting heart rate pretty quickly once they start changing these patterns. Then just an overall sense of well-being and mood, understanding that they now have control. They have a little tool that they could use, whether they might have been going through panic attacks and having big issues with panic attacks or anxiety and then taking these techniques, using them and being able to get them under control. Watching that, what we teach a lot as well is, all right, understanding what the kind of stress triggers are, where you start feeling it in the body, when you start feeling it. And then here's a tool you can use like in the moment. We call it like SOS breathing, something like that. And basically take control of that pattern. And instead of letting your breathing control, you control it and then you slow yourself down. So coming out of things like panic attacks, we just recently had a client in our group coaching program talking about that, how he was suffering from a lot of panic attacks and has been using these techniques, and it's just done wonders for him on that front. People who are get stressed out traveling or things like that, give them techniques and being able to move through that kind of stuff in a much easier sense of well-being along those lines, and just a little bit more peace as they go through that. And then even on the athletic realm. Is we've worked in the past with athletes being able to stay calm, ones who might work themselves up, become overwhelmed, become stressed, and letting their mind stop them during competitions, having some techniques where they can go through, push through, compete, and not letting the bad things happen, which are always going to happen. Learning how to deal with them and keep going those are some of the best outcomes.
That's interesting because you were talking about traveling. I've nearly had 4 panic attacks in my life, and they were all flying, and I was in a plane, and I couldn't move anywhere because it was too cramped, and we'd been stuck on the runway for
Mhm.
hours sometimes, and just sitting there, getting hot. What I started doing is, okay, start breathing. I was talking to a gentleman this last week. He's a big traveler like I was, and we were talking, he said, "I had the same thing when I get stuck on a runway. It's not even about taking off or anything. It's just being all of a sudden it feels like it's almost claustrophobic." And I think for me, it hit because it got so hot on the plane each time. But when you're traveling, all of those things happen. But it's good to know I was doing the right thing to not finally freak out.
It can help a lot. That's right.
It does. It does. Uh, the biggest anxiety increase, I think, in age would be, I think from I read something the other day, it's like from early teenage girls who are teenage age up till about 25, the anxiety in that demographic has risen remarkably in the last 10 years. Do you see a lot of that in people maybe coming to you in that demographic, or is that something you don't notice around? I don't know who comes to you.
We don't work as much with kids younger. Our demographics mainly about 35 to 55, but we do
Okay.
see that in all the stats we read and the also people we talk to. We have plenty of people who would want us to work with the kids. That's not really where we focus,
Okay.
but there is a lot that is a big thing.
Yeah.
Social media being a big driver of that, constantly connected, constantly worrying about what other people think. There's a ton of stuff. Also, just not being able to get outside. You're stuck. What COVID did to the youth in America, I think, is a travesty. Being stuck on screens, being taken away from friends, not being able to play. And,
Yeah.
there's a lot of great information and books that go detailing really what's going on there. But I think that's something. And I think what we'll do a lot is, working with the parents, then they end up working with their kids. And actually, like,
Good.
Lauren created a 10-day breathing for kids, which is geared towards much younger kids.
Okay.
Well, Mark can talk about that more. It was basically like toddlers up to about 7, 8 years old, and giving some techniques that the parents could use and work with the kids because you're seeing it start even younger. I've had plenty of clients who their kids 5, 6 years old suffer from anxiety, and I don't even know how that can happen. When I was about that years, I was just outside running around the neighborhood playing and getting on my Nintendo occasionally. You were outside so much and playing with your friends. Sure wasn't worried about anything. That.
Lauren, I think that's great, Taylor, that I like teach the parents and the parents teach the kids. That's one thing when you teach something, you learn it twice.
That's
And as a
right.
parent, that would be a great thing. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but they're also the ones that'll probably have the mental awareness to know, hey, Johnny, you need to start breathing this way because they'll probably see it when someone that age couldn't self-regulate like that. So Lauren, what do you teach the parents to deal with the kids without giving too much away, but
Yeah.
being able to help them reduce anxiety or whatever it is they need with their children?
Yeah. So it's basically what we put together was 10 days of breathing for kids. And there's a video for the kids or the parents to do with the kids. And then there's a video for the parents explaining the technique and when they can use it effectively. But it's really interesting because it's basically just all the same things that we use with our adult clients, but obviously distilled down into bite-sized pieces and something manageable for kids. But it's really interesting because I've seen, like Taylor was mentioning, one of my good friends here, when I started getting into this, she was fascinated and really wanted to be able to help her kids. She has 2 littles, and I was over at her house a couple of weeks ago, and I saw her get down eye level with her kiddo, and one of the things that we like to teach is called we call it Take 5, and it's basically you put your finger on the palm of your hand, and you inhale, and you trace your thumb up, and then you exhale, you come back down to the base of your palm, and you trace all 5 fingers, and the idea is that you're giving yourself something to focus on. You're slowing the breath down. And she did it with her, I don't know, 7-year-old or however old her kiddo is, but she called it starfish breathing. And so she just made it like this fun little, almost a game, but was helping her in the process and teaching her. And I think that's the thing that people don't necessarily realize. It's you tell anybody to calm down as an adult, if you just like, relax, calm down. So that's never going to help anyone ever. And especially with kids, if you don't give them the how or the tools, you just yell at them and say, calm down or whatever. They don't know how to regulate themselves yet. So they need to be taught and helped through that. So if we can educate the parents and give the parents the tools to regulate themselves, then that's something that they can actually teach their kids, which is great.
And I think that's great because it's a skill that kid will have the rest of their lives. I look back,
Exactly.
I couldn't breathe. I had my turbinates were too large, and I ended up having to have them taken out and my lower turbinates. And it was the first time I breathed through my nose. And for 2 weeks, I was always lightheaded because I was breathing mouth and nose. It's like way, way too much for me. There was just no way to do it. And I wish I would have learned how to breathe much earlier through my nose once I did have that surgery.
I think that's the thing too. People take for granted, oh, I breathe every day. I don't need to learn how to breathe. But there is actually a proper way to breathe. And you'll be able, like Taylor was talking about earlier, every system in your body will operate more easily, more efficiently, more optimally. So, like, why would you not? It's just something so basic that you have control over. Everybody can do it.
Absolutely. Now, Taylor, you're in the Memphis area, and tell our listeners how to engage with you, get a hold of you, some of the offerings you have if they're interested. Because if I was a parent of a young child, I think this is one of the first things I would do. But share with us, do you do things online? Do they have to be in Memphis? Just walk us through some of the offerings you have and how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, our website is www.symmetry.live. That's the easiest place to find us. So Instagram at symmetry.live, and you can find us both personally through there. We offer stuff virtually and in person. Our one-on-one coaching can be done both ways. We do a group coaching program that is all virtual. So we have people from all over that are part of that program. And we do work for businesses as well. And in Memphis, if you're in Memphis, we do heat and ice sessions, like I mentioned, where you're getting in the sauna, getting an ice bath. We got a great community that comes over and does that as well. We run those a couple times a week, and now that's warming up. We run these fun pool workouts. We use the breaths as a foundation. So when the heat and ice, people talk about the physical aspect, we're real big on the mental. Learning how to control your breath in a stressful situation and then calm yourself down is a skill that you can take forever. Pool workouts, very similar, very breath focused. You're learning how to control your mind and stay calm and focused. So those are the in-person stuff. We do workshops as well along those lines. Easiest ways to find us, symmetry.live.
Before I finish up here, you said you work with businesses. Tell me how that works. Give me a business that you've worked with and the results of the team, because I think it's always good when a business can take something on and help their people personally. So how do you work with businesses?
Yeah, we have a few different offerings with businesses. We've worked with Nike, we've worked with Faraday, we've worked with quite a few Memphis companies as well, from financial institutions to commercial real estate. Stuff like that. And one of the offerings is we go in and teach them stress, understanding what's going on in the body, the nervous system when we get stressed out, realizing that email coming in is a trigger, it's a response, it's going to cause a stress response in your body. Then putting them through a breath session, let them understand power of the breath, and then giving them like 3 techniques that they can use. Something typically to use before a meeting, something to stop stress in the moment, and something that will help them go to sleep at night. Then we also do full workplace wellness programs where we'll come in and we'll meet with your company every month. And we focus on breathing, mindset, habit building are the 3 of the main areas we focus there. We can also kind of craft it to really what you need, but overall bring in a full wellness program so we can really change, because you look at what stress does to your healthcare costs, to your productivity. We have all the stats listed, but I don't have them with me and off the top of my head. And it is amazing. And just by creating a wellness program, you can see 5x your return just by putting something like that in place for
I
your
love that.
employees,
I love that.
along
Taylor,
with employee
Lauren.
retention there.
Oh, no, it's great because I find when that stress hits, all creativity goes away. before I have a meeting, I shut everything off. And for 2 minutes, I call it my focus process, where I just shut everything off. It's my meditation, clearing my head. But I find myself as I breathe through that time, get myself centered. And my meetings are so clear when I get into it like that. So I start a lot of my meetings with clients like that. We call it the 2 minute focus process. So
I love that.
Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
yeah. We're doing it on Zoom. So we just cut everything off. And then I have a little timer at 2 minutes. We flip everything else back on and get to work. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Lauren, Taylor, thank you so much for being on the show. And folks, again, symmetry.live. If you want to get a hold of them, I encourage you to reach out, at least have a conversation if you're concerned about your breathing, or maybe someone you work with or live with, especially if they're snoring a lot, right? Also, just to let people know, I don't think that CPAP would have worked had I had the whole mouth thing, but I had the one where it just goes into the nose, and I have to breathe like that. It changed everything for me. So I really appreciate the work you're both doing. And everyone, thanks for being a listener on another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. If you'll put a little like on there, that'd be nice to have that, or a follow, that would be great. And we'll see you next time on A Shot of Inspiration. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Greg.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Shot of Inspiration. If you like this or any of our other episodes, make sure you rate it and share it with a friend. This is Greg Stevens, and we look forward to being with you next time. Until then, be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth.